please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
To Bazaar Corporate Radar, we're looking at a lot of the big companies that have been moving in the last few days and weeks. For now, we have the Maruti numbers that the street is reacting to. Good set of numbers. Export growth has been strong, 11,900 units. And overall as well, the numbers are largely in line with expectations. No problems over there. A couple of other stocks that have been hitting new highs. Godrej Agrovet is one stock that has been on a tear lately. That stock is up about 5.5%, a new high on Godrej Agrovet. And IPCA Labs has made a huge comeback of sorts. IPCA Labs too has hit a fresh 52-week high right now.
Godrej Agrovet actually might be catching up with Venky's. That move on Venky's has just been phenomenal, and I mean, just mind-boggling, the move, and of course others catching up. But yes, we have the management.
Yes, we have actually a management joining us from the Kotak Investor Conference. Repco Home Finance, the stock has been making a 52-week low this week after their numbers. Asset quality was an issue, and it was the loan against property segment that people worried about. We have the management with us. Mr. R. Varadarajan, Managing Director, joins in. Good morning, Mr. Varadarajan. Thanks much. If you can just take us through this niggling problem, the loan against property and the asset quality. Is this likely to persist now in this fourth quarter as well?
No, as I agree with you, no, asset quality deteriorated during the Q3. It was not to the expected level. But what we are seeing is, good amount of recovery is happening during the current quarter. So we are putting all our efforts, to bring down the gross NPA from the level of 3.7 to at least 2 to 2.5. Our aim is to at least we should be below 2.5. That's what we are aiming at, and we believe that we should be able to reach it. It is a doable thing. And even in the loan against property segment, we are seeing recoveries happening there, and we should be able to show good amount of improvement there also.
Okay. Earlier, your disbursements had gotten hit because of demonetization, but you told us that now it's started to improve a tad bit. What is the outlook as far as disbursements are concerned over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, for the current quarter, we are expecting, say both sequentially as well as year-on-year improvement in the disbursements. But FY 19 and 20, our disbursements and the loan growth will be as usual. It will be around 20-25% growth we are expecting in the next 2 years.
Okay, Mr. Varadarajan, the key talking point for finance companies is the rise in cost of money. It's gone up significantly. Are you going to head into an ALM mismatch?
No. Our ALM as of now is very comfortable, and almost all the banks are giving us funding at MCLR rate, and we are able to get at a good amount of reduction in the rate of interest also. And that is why, if you see our performance consistently in the last 4 or 5 years, we were able to maintain the spread of 3 and NIM of above 4. And I very strongly believe we will be able to do it in the near future also. There should be no pressure on our spread. And our ALM meets at least every fortnight and then decide on the rate of interest to be offered to the customers also. We have good leverage there. And therefore, we should be able to maintain the spread in the future also.
What is the average age of your liability and average length of your asset?
So it is almost equal. Say it is around 7 to 10 years. The maximum no loan is existing with us more than 10 years, and also liability. Almost all the banks are giving at around 10 years now.
Okay, you said that your target to achieve is 2 to 2.5% on gross NPAs. But where are you seeing stronger recoveries from? Is it in the home loan segment or is it in the loan against property segment?
It is in both, because in the Q3 there were some distortions, that is particularly between 90 to 120 days. It just slipped by a month, and as per norms we have to classify it as the NPA, and there are about in the gross figure at least around 100 crore slipped in that case, so which we are able to recover now, and they are getting to the standard assets. Therefore, that's why I told you, we have a very strong belief that we should be able to clock at that rate only at GNPA level.
Clock at that rate only would be what? 2.5, 3? What is the rate? What's the stable rate?
Between 2, but less than 2.5.
Oh, less than 2.5. That's positive to hear. Mr. Varadarajan, pleasure speaking with you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us with your thoughts. So that's a confident management, you'll have to say, able to manage the rise in costs. But we have to take a break. That promised chat with the Jefferies banking expert, Nilanjan Karfa. Well, let's focus on the sector that's 40% of the Nifty, the finance space and the banking space. Joining us now is Nilanjan Karfa of Jefferies. Well, good morning, Nilanjan. Good to have you with us. It's a very optimistic note that you have, considering the long-term problems that the PSU bank space have. The private banks have a long, bright period ahead of them. Just explain that theory to us. What do you see for the private banks, and would you buy them all?
I mean, look, if you look at what has been happening the last couple of years, is the reluctance of the government to put in capital, and thereby they had to, obviously restrict a couple of these PSU banks from growing. They have to shrink the balance sheet. They have to pay down their, AT1 bonds. So they have been losing a lot of market share. Most of this is basically the large corporates. So my guess is some of the larger creamier customers on the corporate side is definitely moving to the private sector banks. I think what is particularly, hitting some of the smaller PSU banks and the weaker ones is actually the slowdown in the pace of savings account. I think that is particularly disheartening. And I think that's the one space where private banks have really made a lot of, improvement. Obviously, that's going to help their overall cost of funds, right? And as the yield curve has kind of steepened, you have seen the MCLRs start to go up. Even the retail term deposits rates are going up. I think this is going to be overall beneficial for the private banking system. They will be able to keep their overall cost of funds substantially down, even as the yields kind of move up.
Okay, Nilanjan, good morning. But having said that, private banks have always got that premium over PSU banks, of course. The question here is, from the risk-reward point of view, are some of the larger PSU banks now presenting a decent opportunity? For example, a State Bank of India.
At some point, yes. I know. I'm just kind of going back to several years of history. Is if the macro conditions, if the micro conditions improve, PSU banks do tend to kind of benefit from that. And if you look at for example the retail space, the retail space is reasonably healthy. I think the only weak point, as I see it today, is a couple of home financing segment where there has been some pockets of weakness. Nothing substantial, but it's just some niggling problem, and as we just heard from Repco, for example. If you look at the other asset financing space, if you look at two-wheelers, cars, commercial vehicles, I think they're doing phenomenally well. If you look at then going down into personal loans, credit cards, the growth is 30%, 35%. So there has been a reasonable amount of improvement on the retail side. Things have not slowed down at all. On the corporate, I think there has been an improvement at the margins. I think that is primarily driven by the working capital side, and which in turn kind of feeds off from the improvement in commodity prices. And then if you look at profit margins of many of these companies, they have obviously improved last couple of quarters. So there is a lot of improvement that we have seen on the corporate side. What has not improved is capex. Private capex still remains a lot weaker.
So that is the view as far as PSU banks that are not scam tainted are concerned. So names like SBI, etc. But despite all the issues, you still have a hold on names like PNB. You maintain a hold on Bank of Baroda as well. Are you still keeping the faith with some of these names?
It's been a difficult space, Sonia. There has been challenges, right? And I don't think the management have been cogent always. So I think the numbers are not keeping pace with what what managements have broadly guided. But having said that, I think what the problem is if you look at the overall bucket of stress, for example, look at SMA1, SMA2 of the banking system, right? This has actually gone down. For private sector banks, I was just looking at these numbers, between March and September, For private sector banks, the SMA2 numbers are down 40%. Even for PSU banks, these are down about, I think, somewhere around 25, 26%. So recognition is happening, but even the SMA2 numbers are going down. So I don't think we are adding newer problems. We're not adding newer challenges. So if you look at the aggregate of stress pool, that remains fixed, sort of fixed. What is changing is the way these are getting recognized, right? So earlier, if we just ignore what RBI has recently said about stressed assets, right? So these recognitions would have happened over, would have been spread over 4, 5, 6 quarters. What probably changes now is a large part of recognition that is probably going to happen in March and perhaps in June. So it's the way you recognize this problem assets that is changing. Obviously, the market is always focused on the near term, right? So they will obviously get very, very disturbed in when they look at the March quarters. I think the markets will be scared. But what I want to kind of tell you is, and your viewers, is this is not a point to worry. I think this is just the way the recognition is happening.
No, I take your point.
The entire problem set has not changed, or it has not.
Yeah. No, Nilanjan, actually, I want to congratulate you on the point that very few people talk. It's the abdication of space in the liability side by the PSUs that people should worry about. We always keep worrying about how their asset quality is poor. I take your point on that, but because of that, let me come back to the theme you began, that, abdication of space to private banks, therefore. Some private banks are pricey, yes, but therefore will you go down the line? Say Federal Bank, DCB, AU Financials. Should that be the place where people will make more money? RBL?
I mean, Lata, if you look at bring in valuations into the picture and look at return on equity, for example, right? I think it's, you are kind of right in saying, for example, HDFC Bank or Kotak Bank is pricey. Maybe an IndusInd Bank is pricey as well. RBL is definitely pricey, right?
Yes.
But, at the end of the day, you will still have to look at earnings growth.
Okay.
If you get an earnings growth of 20, 25%, where else do you get this kind of growth?
Fair point.
Right? So I don't per se expect valuations to come down. The only thing I would perhaps mention is we, as a regime, we are moving from a high liquid, low interest rate regime to a low liquidity, high interest rate regime. Risk-free rates, if you look at the zero curve, that has gone up by, I think, close to 60 to 65 basis points in the last 6 months. Surely that will reflect on the the overall discounting rate and therefore an impact on valuations. But beyond that, I'm not too worried about it.
Okay, Nilanjan, yeah,
thank you very much for joining us with your thoughts. It was a pleasure speaking with you and to learn about how you look at the banks. But I think the big talking point that is going to be for the next 2 months is that Indians have to brace themselves for much more heat. The Met Department has forecast a blazing summer across North India. DS Pai, Director Long Range Forecast at the India Met Department, is joining us. Mr. Pai, good morning. Thanks a lot. Can you give us more color on this? How bad does it get and what does that mean for the monsoons?
Good morning, Lata. Actually, as per the forecast released yesterday, we expect that during the pre-monsoon, that is March to May, the average normal temperatures over meteorological subdivisions, over most of the subdivisions over the country, likely to be in the positive side, that is above normal. However, seasonal average temperature over many subdivisions from northwest and neighboring central India, they are likely to be slightly more than 1 degree. So as a whole, during these 3 months, we expect above normal heat wave conditions over core heat wave monsoon region, that is particularly northwest and central India, Andhra Pradesh in the south, etc. And coming to the monsoon season, generally the temperatures during the pre-monsoon, in the later part of the pre-monsoon has got some impact. So as of now, it is too early to talk about the monsoon. If this type of temperature, high temperature continues even in the later part of the monsoon, that may be good for early part of the monsoon. But thereafter, the sea surface temperature and other parameters will come into force which will control the monsoon.
How does this compare to, Mr. Pai, how does this compare to what we saw last year? Is the heat wave going to be much worse than what we saw last year in the northern region?
It may be nearly similar to last year. We had last year also during March, April, early part as well as May, we had a lot of heat wave conditions. But this year we are expecting, particularly in the southern part, things may be slightly better than the last year. Last year we had a Tamil Nadu and Andhra and all had above normal temperature. So there may be slight improvement. It may be more cooler than last year. Particularly possibly that we may get better pre-monsoon showers in those parts.
Actually, that was going to be my next question. If it's bad for north and slightly better for south, where do we figure, sir? Bombay?
Yeah, Bombay in between you can expect actually in the northern part you will have a much more temperature maybe higher than more interior part, and in the west coast anyway Mumbai because of the humidity temperature may be relatively better, but it may be more uncomfortable because of the humidity plus the temperature.
Okay, that's uncomfortable, discomforting. But thank you very much for joining us and giving us an idea of what we are in for in the next 2 months. What Mr. Pai tells us is it's going to be a warm summer, and Holi officially marks the start of the season. So before the heat hits us, we hope you enjoy Holi tomorrow. Cool down before we heat up. Enjoy the long weekend, and we will see you bright and early on Monday morning.